Hello everyone, hope we're doing well. Today I'm going to do a rebuild of my K04 turbo. So this is the turbo that I got from Max Speeding Rods. It cost about £124 for the whole assembly, and I'll show you the little issue that I've got with it. So as you can see, the blades are in pretty poor condition and I've got a lot of axial movement. So I'm almost going to be doing a mutant style turbo today. I've got this cartridge here from Turbo Rebuilds. It's I believe that's a Melett cartridge. Costs about £130, and I'm going to be using the old genuine housing from my K04, but I'm going to take some of the hardware off the Max Speeding Rod turbo, so that I can reuse this. And it would just save me a bit of money. A genuine K04 turbo is about £750. So if I can build this for less than 150, then I'm doing quite well. I also had to purchase a new Wastegate actuator. This one, which came with the Max Speeding rods, is just not set up properly. It takes about 20 psi for it to move and engage. This you can almost pull by hand. It's about 5 or 6 psi. So it's what I'm going to be putting on instead. So that costs about £30. So in total, it's about £160, which isn't bad. You also get a oil syringe to pre-fill. You get new washers, and if not, you can always get a load of new washers off Amazon for under a tenner. But you get new washers, a new gasket, and then a new plug and a washer in there. So I'm going to rebuild this and just show you what I'm going to do. So first off, the thing that you need to really look at is the alignment. Now we've got here where it hasn't been touched yet, and so what I'm going to do is just make a mark on it so that I know roughly where it should be. So I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to try and line it up for the middle of this and just get that all the same. Okay, so we've got a mark. What I can then start doing is take the bolts out for this and reuse them. And that means that I can then look at the alignment for this and hopefully get that almost perfect first time. If I do need to readjust it, it shouldn't be that much of an issue. You can do that probably one or two ways, which is loosening the bolts around here and moving that housing, or loosening the bolts on this side and turning it. So I'll show you once I've finished it so you can see what it's like, and yeah, maybe I'll show you what it's like when it's running as well. So just quickly, I don't know if I mentioned, but these are 10mm, so you need a 10mm spanner, especially to get into these ones. I'm just going to turn the light on, I think. On it, you can see it okay there. So these ones are going to be quite difficult to get out, and you've got, to be honest, I don't know what they're called, but you've got these metal hinges, metal brackets that are in place, and so you just need to take your time with getting them out. You can heat them up. You can use some WD-40 or some other lubricating spray to try and get them off. Because this hasn't been in too long, I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue. But everything is tightened up, and they're all going to be fairly tight because you don't want any movement in this. So just make sure once you're putting it back together that you check everything properly. Just check and double check before you put it in, because you don't want to get all the way to installing it to find out, you know, you've got some movement. So for this assembly, what you've got holding this on is your wastegate actuator, and also this type of bracket. This is the genuine one. And so essentially it goes something along the lines of that. And then, let me just flip that around. and then that. And that is what holds this in place. So you'd still be able to move it if you start loosening those bolts off, and you can move it to whatever position it needs to be. So just bear that in mind when you're doing that. Also, this is so much easier if you've got a vise or something to put the old one in, that you can take those bolts off. But it's not the end of the world if you don't. You just got to have two hands to try and take them off, and again, take your time with it. Alternatively, you can order these online, but I think you have to order the turbo rebuild kit, and that's around about £45, something along those lines. So yeah, just bear it all in mind. Right, so I'm just lining it up now, and as you can see, so we've got here, which is the old gasket, and that's on that side. I believe that's a oil return line, and so we've got the same here. So we just want to start making sure that we've got the positioning fairly accurate, because we can slide this all the way around if we need to wherever it is it's supposed to be. So just looking at that and looking at that, just looking back, just double check and make sure that that's okay. We also then want to look up and see what else we're in line with here, so that we can keep a fairly accurate idea. Right, so I'm slowly building it up, and what I'm going to use is my verniers here. So I decided that this might be a good way to measure it, is just go by going from the center hole, the center hole of there, and then just going to the center hole of that oil plug and getting what the distance is there. So it is just under 37, and then doing the same here, so the distance there, and just seeing whereabouts we actually get to. So sorry, my photography skills aren't very good. So you can see that we're nearly there, so that's just another indication. So I can start tightening this side up, and then I can get that actuator on. So I've just tightened up this side so it's tight. It's not really a good indication, and what I'm going to do is just quickly find out what sort of torque they should be rated to. So if you do have a torque wrench, you can then use your 10mm socket and tighten these up to that correct torque. I would suggest getting the actuator on as well, so at least you've got even coverage before torquing them up. But once that side is done, it's going to be difficult to do your hot side and torque them up to the correct settings. Not only can you just about get a spanner on there, you wouldn't be able to get a socket on there. So you're just going to have to go around evenly and tighten them up. But while you're building it, just double check that everything's spinning freely. So after you've tightened down one side, just check that it's okay and you can't hear any scraping noises. That seems to be okay, so going to continue. Right, so that's built up, that section. I did use my torque wrench to torque them up. I only torqued them up to, I think, about 20 Newton meters. That just seemed sort of fairly tight for it, and I don't want to go over the top, but I think that should be okay. So I couldn't find anything online to suggest otherwise, so that's what we're going to do. Right, so now what we're going to do is take off, I believe this is the coolant line. Yeah, it is. So we're going to take off the coolant line, and we'll leave that off for the time being until everything else has been built up, and then we'll put that back on. So what you'll need is a size 8 Allen key, and then I believe this is a size 5. And you can just undo that. It takes about 2 seconds. Right, so it's off. So this side, the cold side, will literally come off. Sorry, it's a bit hard to do it one-handed. 2 seconds. Well, they would come off if it wasn't for the fact that the blades inside have warped so much, not allowing it to come off that would usually come off. So what we're going on to next is to try and get these bolts out, and that will allow us to also take these locking mechanism, I honestly don't know what you'd call them, off as well, and then we'll chuck that on there. Also, just be aware what we're trying to do, there we go, is we've marked up this side as well, and that is almost directly in line with our oil return feed. So once we've taken this off, then, although we're not using this housing, we're looking at the same sort of marks. So we've got this here, and it's just over the other side, and we'll be able to figure it out. The reason why we're not using this, as I mentioned in a previous video, is because of our wastegate. You can see how small that is in comparison to our wastegate over here, which is far bigger. So that's why we're changing this side too. Right, so I've loosened them all, and then they were originally like that, which is holding the lip in place. And so if you just move them and move them all and give it a little shimmy, it comes off. And here we have our compressor side, not our compressor side, sorry, our hot side. I'm just looking at the damage here, and you can see quite clearly how badly damaged it's been. And again, that's either from overspinning, which has caused it, or just the amount of movement that we've had has then wedged it in place, causing that damage, further heating it up and causing warping. So now what we're going to do is just transfer this to this one, and then we'll continue. So when you're putting the housing on, you also need to get your wastegate valve on the rod as well. So we'll set that up later, and I'll talk about that in a later video. But once it's on there and it looks okay, you can then start tightening these back up by pushing them in and then sorting them out. I'm going to just talk a minute about why I haven't gone back to the original. So firstly, I've noticed that one of our inserts is actually spinning, which is going to make this really difficult to tighten up when I need to later on to the exhaust manifold. Also, I've had a look, and I don't know how well my phone's going to be picking this up, but you've got a hairline crack just on the outside, which I'm a bit dubious about because I don't want it to get any worse and then result in having to take the turbo out again. And also on the inside there is a little crack, which you might be able to see. So in hindsight, well, not in hindsight, but I just have decided now that I'm not going to use this one, and we'll just see how we get on with the max speeding rod exhaust side. Hopefully it'll be okay. So yeah, that is roughly how to rebuild your turbo using a using a pre-built and balanced assembly